Hey, welcome back to our podcast. And as you already know, our podcast is called YOML, a year of magical learning. For those who are new, please hit the subscribe button to get notified when we have another upload. So essentially, we are on book 86 today, a new week. And so I'll have Chris introduce you to the book and we can talk about it.
Yeah, so this is an interesting book, pretty far off my radar in terms of the type of genre it was, and I'll explain that in a minute. But the book's called Attached, The New Science of Adult Attachment and How It Can Help You Find and Keep Love by the authors Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. It's by psychiatrists and neuroscientists, the two authors, and they explain why some people are able to navigate relationships effortlessly while other people struggle. So they lay out there are three different styles of attachment. You have avoidant attachment, anxious, and then the third one is secure. So the secure one is what everybody wants, right? You want to feel secure and you want to feel like you understand who you are and how you want to be interacted with and how you want to interact with people. Anxious is it says in the name, you're always constantly worried, constantly fearful about stuff. And then avoidant is whenever there's a conflict that rises, they just kind of put their hands up and they're like, I'm out of this. I don't want to engage. I don't want to get too close to somebody. So that's the spectrum of attachment. It goes from anxious to secure to avoidant and then vice versa. The theory is a lot of times anxious people and avoidant people are like magnets to each other. And that's why the relationships are always volatile. You're always stuck in one attachment phase. You can shift, but it takes a lot of time and effort to shift. If you are naturally an anxious person or an avoidant person, typically you need to find a secure person to balance that out. And then slowly but surely over time, that'll shift a little bit. So like a secure person in theory should be able to have a relationship with anybody because they're secure with themselves. So even if their partner may be avoidant or anxious, they can balance that out. But if you put like an anxious and an anxious together, or an avoidant and an avoidant together, or an anxious and avoidant together, it's pretty volatile actually.
If you have an anxious and avoidance together, does that attract?
Oh yeah, at the beginning of it's like fireworks, really hot and heavy, and then slowly but surely over time, as one wants more attention, the other one doesn't like that, and they'll start to fade away. And then that person will want more attention, and the other person starts to slowly drift away. And then eventually that avoidant person will be like, I'm just out of here. And the anxious person will get more anxious. And then it's like a catch-22. It's just circular. And then the funny thing is, those are typically the people that you'll find to be the most single people. If you go out to a bar or something like that, you don't typically find a lot of very secure people that are out there looking for a mate because they've already found somebody. They are secure. Anxious and avoidant people continue to attract each other, and they go back into the singles pool, then they attract each other, and then they go back and they attract. So like, the cycle really, I'm paraphrasing this book. Like it's not necessarily all about this, but it really spends most of the time talking about anxious and avoidant attachment styles. Just because those are what people need. Anyway, this isn't the year of magical learning book reviews. This is the year of magical learning as to reflections, right? So I'll get to the reflection. My reflection from this particular book was, if you want security, attach to your values. So like I said, there's three different attachment styles: anxious, secure, and avoidant. And my thought with that title is, if you're not secure, or if you want security, it's about understanding your values, right? So I'll get to the why behind all that in a second here. So fun little cadence of how this book even came on my radar. I don't know if you remember, but when we first wanted to start making a podcast, we were originally going to do the I Can't Imagine podcast, which I think we're still going to pick up eventually. It eventually kind of morphed into this magical learning podcast. When we first started it, we wanted to meet people that had their own I Can't Imagine events, hear their stories, and then have a question and answer session and learn more about their lives and their missions, that their I Can't Imagine event spawned. Well, the first recording that we did was with a friend of mine. I won't put his name in here because I didn't ask him about this stuff, but we did the podcast recording, and he had his own I Can't Imagine event, and he was telling us about going to a therapist, and this was the book that they recommended, was this attachment theory, or Attached. So he read it, he really liked it, really enjoyed it, and he thought it was a big breakthrough for himself in terms of how he related for his relationships going forward. And he ended up getting married a few years later. He actually just recently got married, which we all know this particular person in our friend circle is somebody that was always kind of like a lifelong bachelor, dated a lot of people all the time. He credits this book as to something that helped to open his eyes to how he could be better in a relationship and shift more to that secure attachment theory. Anyway, so that was the first time I heard about this book. I was like, it sounded kind of interesting. If that was a big, impactful book, and this is all about learning, I'll check it out, right? Well, I don't know if you remember this, but like 4 days after that, when we did that initial recording, we did our our anti-book club weekly meeting. and somebody came to that one, and the book that they wanted to review was they were reading at that time was attached. I was like, oh man, talk about universe conspiring to, when you want something, the whole universe conspires to make it happen kind of thing that we talked about with the alchemists in the past. And I was like, look, I don't know what the universe is trying to tell me here, but like,
the omen said read the book.
The omen said read the damn book, right? So I went and bought the book and went through it, and I enjoyed it. I feel like I learned a lot. I feel like it's something that I've gone back to many a times in the past since I've read it, in terms of how I start to think of things. I will say this, I'm trying to get away from the categorization side of everything, because everything is really fluid. I think it's really hard to say somebody's secure or anxious, I don't like the black and white labeling of things, but it does help to talk about maybe how you can interact better with somebody. But anyway, what this whole book really made me think about was something that you and I talk about the most. If you want to be secure in anything, like, it always has to start with knowing yourself, right? You can't be a secure person and not know who you are, or not know what's important to you, not know what matters to you. That's all I could think about the entire time that I was reading this book. If you really want security and you want to be the secure attachment style, it always starts with understanding your values and secure yourself to those values. Spend your time anchoring on your values, spend your time understanding who you are and who you want to be. And that will ultimately bring you security. It's like that comfort blanket that you can always go back to when you're like, who am I? Who do I want to be? And how do I want to act in this particular situation? Well, anchor to your values, and that'll bring you that security and peace of mind, where you can always know how your elephant might be acting or reacting in a particular situation, and then how to interact with other people based off of that. So I feel like I'm a broken record, but what we value is who we are. And if you want to move to more of a secure attachment style, then really attach to your values. The question for anybody following along with this is, what's your attachment style? Anxious, avoidant, or secure? You can answer the question, or just love to get your thoughts on the reflection in general, or the book, whatever you want to start with.
Your attachment style this is not something we choose until we can actively, I guess,
understand,
overcome
right.
it, right? Because if you're anxious, it's not like you wanted to be anxious, right?
Some people do. Some people find it exhilarating to always be on edge, be anxious. Or some people, like, I think what you're saying is,
because
you don't know that you're doing
either
that.
your condition creates you as an anxious person, or as an avoidance person, or a secure person. It's not that, hey, I chose to be anxious. I'm just anxious because of whatever
you're nurturing
upbringing
that
I've been conditioned to.
Correct.
It just makes me anxious when I'm like, your childhood experience creates you as this person with this attachment style.
I totally agree. I mean, this is all very much so nurture driven, in my opinion. Just like we're talking about, you can change, you can shift, and you can morph on that spectrum, in my opinion. Like, if you're anxious now, that doesn't always mean you need to be anxious. You can shift, you can morph yourself. And this is how I'm recommending you do it, is attach to your values, and then you'll figure out, what does that security look like and mean to you? But yeah, I think you're on the right page.
Right, but the thing is, but I really agree with you on your reflection, because when you attach to your values, you always become secure. You don't become anxious. You don't become avoidant. I don't know if that's true or not, but
why would you avoid your values?
It sounds like secure is what you want to become.
Yeah.
Right. So for an anxious and avoidant style, it's not something that you choose. It's something it happens to that you experience.
Correct. It's
right. Yeah. But it's
naturalized.
Right. And so you want to be secure. You want to be independent. Right. You want to choose what you want to be, how you want to be, how you want to act. Secure is the ultimate, I guess, the stage you want to be at.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Well, in theory, it sounds better than being anxious or avoidant, I guess, if you had to choose one of the three, right?
Right. And another thing is, it's probably not everybody is going to fit into one of these three. It could be others, right? Could it be others?
I mean, sure, why not? I mean, somebody made this up, I mean, yeah, there's some science behind it, like, but you can make up science as well. Like, I mean, I don't know the answer to your question of, is there other styles of attachment? I mean, sure. I mean, why not? We could make them up if we wanted to, like, I think of like all those assessments and the Myers-Briggs and the DISC profiles and the, whatever, right? Like you could come up with a million different personality assessments, if you wanted to, and label it however you wanted to label it. I mean, that's why I don't really put a ton of value into these things. The truth is, if you're avoidant or anxious in this scenario, the underlying truth is you don't know yourself because you don't feel comfortable with yourself. Otherwise, because if you did, you wouldn't choose to be anxious or avoidant about how you interact with other people if you were comfortable with yourself.
Right. That's how I see it, though. I
Right.
completely agree with what you're saying, but that's how I see it. So what I see, it's either you're insecure or you're secure. I mean, that's how
Exactly.
I
Right.
see it. I mean,
Right.
that's not, if you
That's
want to label something, you label something is or isn't. So
correct.
to have three different label, I think, it's probably going to be missing some stuff.
Sure.
And I just want to make sure that's what we're talking about before we move on to the secure, because I don't want to say, hey, don't be anxious, don't be avoidant, because I think in a labeling, you either secure or you're not.
Sure.
And that depends on multitude of different variables. For example, you could be secure when you are at your own home, but you can be insecure when you're in another place that makes you feel uncomfortable.
Right.
So secure person could be insecure in other situations.
Environment matters.
Right, right. So to me, go back to what I want to make a point here is I really agree with the reflection is your value is who you are, right? Who you are, the more you know about yourself, the more you'll be secure in most places and most times. And so you want to be in the majority of your time on earth, right? You want to know as much about yourself as possible. The more you know about yourself, the more comfortable you are dealing with different situations. Therefore, you're going to be as much secure as you would have been. And so, we are pounding this idea of values to death, but I think it's really important to understand this value because it's being brought up over and over and over again in multitude of different situations. And, and because we bring it up because it works. That's the secret ingredients
Right.
to finding this enjoyable life, the fulfillment of independence. That's the secret ingredient is you gotta figure out who you are, know who you are,
And do it on
understand
purpose.
yourself, right? And the more you do, the more you can be comfortable.
The more secure you become, very secure with yourself when you know who you are, and then you're able to guide your life by the actions that align to who you are, right?
Right, because sometimes you can't run away from who you are. You are who you are, right? You have to accept it. Sometimes, you say, well, I wish I'm a basketball player, but if you're not, you don't have the height, right, to play basketball, then
right,
that's not going to give you fulfillment. I mean, so you have to understand who you are and accept who you are. You are born because of a certain genetic makeup, right? And that requires certain, I guess, complementary, work or whatever. That's why we call it meaningful work. The work that it is complement to who you are.
Right.
Right. And once you fulfill that, it becomes complete. Having a completion give you when the things you do gonna give you joy out of doing it.
Right. Well, and then how you interact with people and the meaningful relationships you develop from that. This is about, for me, more meaningful relationships, like the meaningful work side of everything, because you can't develop meaningful relationships with somebody unless you're able to get to know them at their core, like what really matters to them, who they are, and be able to share that effectively with yourself as well. If you and I were to go do this magical learning journey together and it was always superficial, we were just guessing or I wasn't talking about stuff that was real or authentic to what I actually cared about or what was important to me. It comes across into shows, but then B, like, you start to, those other emotions, those doubts start to creep in where you're like, why isn't True doesn't seem like he cares that much about this stuff, or like, maybe I get a little more anxious and I'm like, like pushing you to share more, or like, and then you're like, whoa, like, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. And you start to pull back, and all that is because you're unable to develop those meaningful relationships if both parties, whoever's engaging in a relationship, does not come into it knowing who they are and what they want to be. Now, this is where the whole, insecure versus secure comes into play. If you're dealing with somebody that's super secure and you're insecure yourself personally, and you walk into that relationship, like that example of the way that they live their life will eventually help you to find a way to anchor onto that as well, to say, okay, I get it. Like I'm going to use them as my role model, I guess, if you will. And I can feel secure and move more toward being a secure person and sharing who I want to be, because that other person's already anchored really well. So like that's why like different avoidance and anxious people can coexist with secure people, because it's like an anchor, it's like a rock.
But it doesn't
right?
last. You talk about anxious and avoidant. I mean, it's complementary in a way, but it doesn't last, right? It becomes a spiral. It's a spiral, and it's gonna go get out of control.
Right. They have to shift more toward being secure.
So eventually, you want something to go long term. It has to be secure. If you don't have secure, it's not gonna last. It's temporary, because you can say, well, I'm anxious and I'm kind of like pair up with an avoidance person. The avoidance and anxious are the opposites, like spectrum, so that they attract for the short term, but then after that it goes out of control. Right. And so in the way that I see it, you have to go from an insecure state, whether that's anxious or avoidant, to a secure state. And I think that state is where you are most yourself. And when you know yourself, then you can be comfortable doing things that hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, right? If you do that, then nothing is fuzzy, nothing is doubtful. And a lot of time we are the doubt comes to your head because you don't really sure what it is that you want. Right. And that creates the sense of uneasy. When you doubt yourself, you feel uneasy, right? And when you're uneasy, then you get kicked out of the secure stage.
Right. Yeah. I mean, being a secure person is also attractive to a lot of people, right? Eventually, not be super flashy or exciting or something along those lines, but like at the end of the day, that's what people want, is consistency and order. They want to feel like they know what they're supposed to do and what they're here for. You know what I mean? And they want to be around people like that. It may not be the roller coaster effect may be really exciting in the beginning, but eventually nobody wants to ride a roller coaster forever. You know what I mean? Like you can't, like the highs and lows are, like that's not how our minds are supposed to operate. And the only way that you can ever get to more of a stable space in any environment, I think you mentioned something really important earlier, like being a secure person means anchoring on your values. You're an environment agnostic, person agnostic, to who you're interacting with agnostic. You're going to be the calm, the eye of the storm, I guess, if you will, because you're anchored around something that kind of keeps you on that consistent path going forward, regardless of geography, time, place, who you're talking to, whatever it may be. That's what we care about, and that's what values can provide for you. Now, if you don't like that, by all means, it is way more exciting to fly by the seat of your pants. Don't get me wrong, it's more exciting. You probably have
more. I mean, to me, it's hard for me to say, hey, I want to be anxious.
I mean, sometimes it's kind of thrilling when your heart's pumping, your mind's in it. I mean, when you get into that heightened state of awareness, I mean, hell, you probably might be the most productive. Like, think of schizophrenia or something like that, right? Where when they're in their manic states, some of the most famous artists of all times have been schizophrenic, and they get into these manic states where
but I don't care. I don't care about the arts and creativity. I leave to the world in exchange for my hell state
I agree.
Mind.
You're true. You're a very secure person. Like, I don't think that we would be able to do this whole experiment you and I have been on if you and I both weren't very secure in what we were hoping to accomplish and what we wanted to do. I bring you like 500. I'm like a dog with a bone half the time. I just walk up with a new idea that popped in my head, and you're like, yeah, is this really what we want to do? And I'm like, no, you're right. Like, all right, let's move on. But if I gave that bone, the dog with a bone, dropped it off in front of somebody that was anxious or avoidant, they might go, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do this. I don't know what I want to do. And then all of a sudden, you guys are both going down this road of complete shit show where your relationship just kind of falls apart and deteriorates because there's not anchored on something of a clear vision or a clear direction or a clear mission or clear values, so I don't think you're going to relate to any of the stuff that I'm saying when it comes to the appeal of being anxious or avoidant, because that's not you.
I just can't see it. I don't want to be anxious. I don't want to be avoidant. If I have to deal with it, I'll deal with it. I don't know.
Well, take your secure paradigm off, and then put your anxious paradigm.
Tell me how can I take my secure paradigm off?
I mean, that's the what do the Stoics call it? I wrote about this in one of my reflections. The premeditated adversity, right? Like, this is, let's just pretend you were an anxious person, and use your imagination. Like, that's what we talk about all the time. Is use your imagination of you're an anxious person. Your wife's an avoidant person, and you're an anxious person. Like what does that look like every single day? I mean, yeah, it sounds like a nightmare, honestly. But at the
Yeah,
same
it sounds
time,
like a nightmare. That's why I can't see the exhilaration that you painting. I don't see it. I just say, well, this is not the feelings I want to have.
there's so many books and plays and movies that have been written about that feeling, that spark, that excitement that comes with, people that are insecure in the roller coaster journey that comes with romantic love and things like that, right? Or companionship or whatever it may be. I bet you 75% to 90% of all content about these kind of movies and books and stuff like that come from an insecure place, because it is exhilarating, like that first initial stages.
So that's interesting, though. I mean, did the book even give you a breakdown of the percentages among the populations that is in each category?
I think they did, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Because before this, I just think most people are on the secure side, right?
No, I think it was, if I remember right, it was something like, 50% of the population is secure, 20% is anxious, 25% is avoidant, and 5% is fearful.
Yeah, majority of people are secure.
Yeah, I would say that. I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is good. Most people are secure. There's only a handful of anxious and avoidance. And eventually they're going to transition from the insecure to the secure.
I mean, to be fair, I think even security is on a spectrum. You can be secure and know who you want to be. But I think you and I would both argue that unless you really know, like, this is another level of security, the stuff that we're talking about with values and mission and purpose and things like that, and meaningful work and meaningful relationships. That's like a whole nother level of security, in my personal opinion. I think on the spectrum of that 50% that's secure, like, I would have called myself secure before this whole journey started. Like, I felt like I knew who I wanted to be and how I could relate in any kind of given interaction, with somebody. But that didn't mean that I had a clear direction and purpose and values that I was anchored on, that was guiding my actions. I think there's like even a difference separating out between secure and what we're talking about as well. I mean, I have no idea what that would be, but I'd say it's less than a couple percent of people that really know who they are and what they want to be in life, and what they want to do. So like, that's like the super secure, I guess, if you will.
Right. So how do they test people and put them?
I know, man. Like, I'm sure they broke down some of the stuff from the
so
science
basically these numbers are like out of thin air.
I'm sure they tested something and did something. That's the funny thing. I actually, just on a side tangent, whenever I read statistics these days, I don't know, I hear them in books and I hear them recited over and over again. And sometimes I hear them and I'm like, where are like, I know that they're citing the sources, but where's the original? Like, who did the work that said that this was the truth? Like, sometimes I just hear these things and we just say them like second nature, like, oh yeah, 50% of the world is secure. I'm like,
exactly.
We're on a podcast talking about, oh yeah, 50% of the world's secure and 25% of this and 20% of that, and I'm like, who the fuck knows? I don't know. I mean, I'm just reciting what somebody else told me.
25%
sure
secure, and 10% insecure, and then 10% avoidant, and 5% fearful. I can say
make
that
up whatever you want to make up. I mean,
because there's no evidence, there's no proof.
I mean, I'm sure there was some study that somebody did at one point in time, but then again, I don't actually know. So it's hard. I can't say, like, the whole 150 people in a tribe kind of thing. I feel like in Loon Shots and Sapiens, I think in Humankind, the truth is, I remember reading somewhere that nobody actually knows where that came from. Like, it just poof appeared out of thin air. 150 people, like, that's about the size of a culture that you can grow, where you can control things. So I don't think anybody has any idea where that actually comes from. I don't know if that's true or not. Or the 10,000 hour rule, I read that somewhere as well, that like that's been totally misconstrued. That was never, nobody actually ever did any scientific work to say what the 10,000 hour rule is. But how many times is the 10,000 hour rule cited over and over and over again?
That's my point, though. That's my point, is like, there is so much things that we take at face value without even asking these people to convince us. Right. We took it, say, hey, that's the number, or that's whatever, but try to convince me. I mean, I'm not asking for like, hey, I want definitive proof and thing. What, give me a convincing argument why that is, right? They don't even tell me the argument, and that's the problem. The problem is we take everything we were fed. We were fed these numbers, these concepts, these beliefs.
Right.
to us, to our kids. Like me and you have been conditioned over decades of things that we have to take at face value, and we have to believe in things without any ounce of convincing evidence.
Or just like beyond face value, we just take it at face value.
Right.
It's like, okay,
And,
that's cool.
And so the problem I want to bring is that because we are conditioned to take these without questioning the sources, we are led to a life that is not our own, a life that we never ask ourselves what it is that we want to be, who we are, what value do we care most. And to me, that is a fundamental problem that we want to wake up the audience and say, look, we have been taught these concepts and beliefs without questions. That's
Right.
why you're not happy. That's why you don't enjoy the things that you do. But if you look into yourself and ask yourself, start asking yourself, the question is, what do I value? What makes me want to do things? Give me joy while I'm doing something. Then that is what is going to be different, because that essentially is going to be, I would call it evidence-based. You do this, right? Rate yourself from a 1 to 10. Do I like it?
And that's fact. Like, you know, because nobody else can argue whether or not
because that's evidence-based, right? It's based
caffeine,
on a feedback.
Right.
Exactly. Based on the feedback. Yeah. Do I like it? Do I hate it? Is it easy? Is it hard? Right.
And is it energizing? Do I need a lot of willpower behind it, or is it feel effortless? You know, is it like eating cake, or is it like eating a frog?
Right.
You know, yeah.
And so I think that's really important. And I want to make sure that, you know, we understand, the audience understand what we're talking about is things we take on and we believe without even asking the other person, the sources to convince us of it. Like I said, I'm not very strict in asking you for definitive proof or anything. I just merely asking, you know, how do you come up? How do you test these people and put them in these categories, right? What's your reasoning? You didn't even tell me that. You just tell, hey, it's 50% this, it's 25% this. It's like, okay.
Well, I mean, I didn't even click on the link.
That's going to be typical of anything else. And I want to make sure that you understand this is, if we don't know anything, like if you don't know, let's say chemistry, you don't know chemistry. And I tell you, you know, calcium has, you know, atomic weight of 100. You believe me?
Sure.
Exactly. But it's not.
Right.
But it's not.
And then if I hear it from 1,000 other people, then I'm going to be like, oh yeah, well, that's the answer, you know?
And I tell you calcium has atomic weight of 100. And then you go and you tell people, hey, calcium is a atomic weight. So that you keep passing on this whatever this rule. And that's the sad thing about this world, is that we don't, it's something with elections. We say, well, this person is that because the other person say. No one hear from the horse's mouth what he or she said.
Right.
I only heard it from this person. Hey, the person's bad, or that person's bad, or whatever.
Right.
And that creates a lot of misunderstanding. And the world is in this chaos and anxious and avoidant mode.
It creates insecurity, is what it creates. Like
exactly.
So you're right on. You're nailing everything. What I was getting at as well is like, look. Like we talk about this all the time, is we don't know shit. Like, but the only thing that I have even a remotely close idea of is what I value. I don't care. You can't argue with me if I say that I value playing. You know, you can't say, well, no, you don't. I'm going to say, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, I do. Like, I don't need to prove that. I just know that I feel good when I say that I like to go play, or like when I learn, or when I do whatever that I say that I like to do. Like there is no justification needed. There's no data that's needed to back that up. You just either feel it or you don't, you know, and that's all that we can really.
But at the end of the day, though, Chris, that's the only thing that matters.
It is.
Regardless of whatever statistics say, you know, do you enjoy it? Does it matter to you?
Then you're secure.
That's the only thing that matters.
Right.
Right. Regardless, being on the top of the mountain is great, or being in the cold weather is great, whatever. But do you like it? If you don't like it, it's miserable. I don't care. I don't care if, you know, 100,000 other people say, hey, you know, being in the cold is really great. Being on the top of the mountain with the freezing, you know, chill air and thin air that you can hardly breathe is really great. Right. But if you go in there and it's not for you, right, and you say, well, it's great because everybody else, you just going with the crowd. even though it's making you miserable. So to me, how you feel, it all that matters in the end.
Yeah. I mean,
right? Because we're talking about the beaver
more.
must dam, right? You're asking wolf to dam. I mean,
Not gonna like it.
It's miserable.
Right.
But the beaver, they get take joy out of making a dam. Painter must paint, and beavers must dam. And so it all that matters is how do you feel when you do it. So your opinion is only matters because that's your life.
I have to say, I'm glad that the conversation has turned to this route, because truth be told, like this whole book, like, I mean, I've said this many a times to you, and I know I've said this now publicly on this podcast, and I know I've written it many a times as well throughout this whole journey. Like, I'm really trying hard to get away from the categorization of life. Like, I didn't actually feel too comfortable going, oh yeah, because I felt myself after I read this book, and I was like, oh, that person's kind of insecure or anxious or avoidant or whatever. I think I even said that to you guys, who you are and who you want to be and how you want to live your life, and to go and to do that, like, and be insecure and doing that. That's why I wrote this reflection. Like, if if you want security attached to your values, like, I mean, that's the only attachment that you need. There's no other constant in this world besides you knowing what you care about and what you like to do and doing that. There is no other constant. Like, I don't care if it's your wife, significant other, parents, like, it doesn't matter. Anybody else is never going to give you that constant, because you're not in their head. Right. You're in your own head, and you have the power to decide that while you have time here on this earth. If you want security and you want to be a secure person, like, attached to your values, which is the only thing that you have control over in this world, in my personal opinion. But then again, I don't know anything. So like
right. But the thing is, try for yourself and see. I mean, right. Like I say, don't take our words for it. Do you think what you feel is important? To me, what we feel is what important to us.
Agree.
And to me, that's the only thing that matters. If it makes somebody else happy, but it makes me miserable, I'm not going to trade that. Not going to.
100%. If somebody wanted to come on here and argue this, like, from a scientific standpoint, I don't care.
I don't care.
like, I'm not saying that to be rude. I don't care.
Pride matters to whatever perspective, but it doesn't matter from my perspective.
Correct.
And like I say, I mean, don't take our word for it, but from your perspective, what matters to you? And I think you agree with me that that's the only thing that matters. Because
it is the only thing that matters. I think did we have to do how to win friends and influence people?
No, not yet.
Ah, crap. I know we talked about this recently, but I know my reflection from that one is like, you will never win any argument with anybody. If they came on here with their own, I mean, you'll never win. Trust me. If there's anybody in this world that knows
perspective,
exactly. I've tried my entire lifetime to argue and convince people for one direction or another. It never works, ever. No matter how hard you try, you're either in alignment with somebody or you're not. Your alignment is always centered around who you are and who you say you want to be. And are you guys going in the same direction? If you are, then great. We can all walk together. But if you're not going to change somebody's way of life, I mean, it's just not going to happen. So anyway, yeah, I think we're kind of beating a dead horse on this one. But yeah, I think that was a fun conversation. Any final thoughts you have?
Well, like I said, don't take our word for it. Take a page from our book and see for yourself whether or not that's true for you, right? That's the key for you. And so try it and see if you relate to it. If not, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah, who cares? Like, yeah, I don't care. If you try it and you don't like it, whatever. I don't care.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, either way, it's an interesting book. If you're into the categorization of things, there's some people that have said they had a lot of value out of it and what they learned, because I think it probably helped them to open up some questions in their own mind where they could dig deeper as to what they really liked and wanted in life, so that's important. So if it helps you to question, then do it. We appreciate you guys joining in, and we look forward to catching up tomorrow.
All right. Sounds good. See ya.